Hello everybody, and today I'll be doing an introduction to the fighting type in the Gym Leader Challenge format. So, a quick rundown of what Gym Leader Challenge is, or GLC for short. The main difference from standard are these decklist restrictions, which are that you can only have one type of Pokemon per deck. You can only have one of each card with the same name in your deck, excluding basic energy. Cards from black and white onward are legal, so it's a very wide and diverse card pool. And then no rulebox cards like Ace Specs, Radiant Pokemon, Prism Star Pokemon, and multi-prize Pokemon like Pokemon EX or V. And then I'll leave the ban list in the description below. So, in terms of support, fighting doesn't have too much. It's really struggling. It actually doesn't have a single Pokemon that lets it consistently draw. The only ability that has the word draw in it is this Lucario with the intuition, where when you evolve it, you draw two cards. And that is all the ability based draw that fighting gets. Which it's unfortunate that it's on a Lucario, because a lot of good cards in fighting are Lucario. And because you can only play one, you kind of got to pick and choose. So this other Lucario is a good example with the precognitive aura, where if you have a Garchomp in play, you can search your deck for any card and put it into your hand once during your turn. So it's good at getting you out consistency, but you need a stage 2 and a stage 1 in play, and with the lack of consistency that fighting has, it's not going to be too easy to do that. There are a bunch of fossil Pokemon that do some interesting things in fighting. This Archeops with the ancient power makes it so that nobody can play any Pokemon to evolve their Pokemon. So if you get the Archeops out early enough, your opponent can kind of just get locked into a basics only board state. This Kabutops with the fossilized memories, where as long as the Kabutops is your active Pokemon, your opponent cannot play any supporter cards. And then this Amistar, where as long as you have fewer Pokemon in play than your opponent, they can't play any item cards. So if you have the Kabutops, Omastar, and Archeops in play, which is a huge ask, you can prevent your opponent from playing supporters, items, and evolving their Pokemon, which just can absolutely make it so your opponent can't do anything at all. This Claydol with the Mystery Charge, you can use this ability only if you don't have any supporters on the discard pile, and then once during your turn you can attach a basic fighting energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. It's not too great because you want to be playing supporters, especially consistency supporters, because again, fighting lacks much ability based consistency. But it's not too difficult to get off, especially if you try to build around it. This Hawlucha with the flying entry, where when you play it from your hand on your bench, you can choose two of your opponent's bench Pokemon and put one damage counter on each of them. So you can kind of fix some math with some spread attackers that I'll talk about later. This Carbink with the Lucky Find is pretty good for getting set up in the early turns, where you just use Lucky Find to search your deck for up to two item cards and put them into your hand. So it can get you set up for the next turn to have some cards to actually play and continue advancing your board state. Colossal with the Tar Generator says once during your turn you may attach a fire or a fighting energy and one of each to your Pokemon in any way you like. So it's a bit of acceleration. There are some Pokemon that pair well with the Colossal, and it's a lot of fighting Pokemon have colorless in their attack costs, so the fire doesn't really affect anything. It's just another energy that you can put into play. Premonition Lunatone. Once during your turn, you may look at the top two cards of your deck and put them back in any order. So it lets you stack your deck, draw into the cards that you want to be drawing into, and again, very little consistency. Fighting wants to have as much possible consistency as it can. Fighting does have bench barrier in Machoke, and this is like bench barrier on steroids, because Daunting Pose prevents all damage done to your bench Pokemon, and your opponent's abilities cannot put damage counters, and they like literally can't do anything to your bench, like at all. No ability based damage counters, no damage counters, no just damage. They can't really do anything at all. So it's super protection. Garganical, there's two of them. This one, Energizing Rock Salt, where you can attach a basic fighting energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon, and if you attach an energy to a Pokemon, you heal 30 damage from it. And fighting can like be tanky, so you can heal a bit with that, and it's just some more energy acceleration. And then this other Garganical with the Blessed Salt during Pokemon checkup, so in between turns, you heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. So you can kind of, again, lean into more tanky, heal your Pokemon in between turns. Fighting has no shortage of attackers. Okidogi, one of a very recent card. It's like absolutely brutal to play against. Drina Power, if it has any dark energy attached, it does 100 more damage and it has 100 more HP. So it'll have 230 HP and it'll be swinging for 170 damage, which if your opponent can't do anything about it, you kind of just take multiple prizes with it. And then that's without attaching like tools to give it more damage or more health, and you can kind of just see if your opponent can do anything about it. Uh, Machamp with the Crisis Muscles, where if your opponent has 3 of your prize cards remaining, the Machamp gets 150 more HP, and it already has 150 HP, so it puts it with 300. And then Strong Arm Lariat, 2 fighting, you may do 100 more damage, and then if you do, the Machamp can't attack. So you swing 200, and then you can't attack during the next turn. So you just kind of survive with 300 HP in the second half of the game. And then you can, again, throw a tool on there and give it maybe 400 HP with the Luxurious Cape. Tinglu, pretty good spread. This is one of my favorite cards in the fighting type with the Ground Crasher, where if a Stadium card is in play, this attack also does 30 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, and then you discard the Stadium. So it's very good, especially with a combo that I'll talk about later on the slide, at just putting damage in play or cleaning up if you miss some KOs. And then this Palossand with the Sandpot Trap does the same thing, but you don't need a Stadium in play. So you can play both of them, and then you can go Ground Crasher into Sandpot Trap into Ground Crasher and spread 90 damage on your opponent's entire board. Back to the Lucarios. Like I said, Lucario is a very good card, just in general. Avenging Knuckle does 130 for 1 fighting if any of your fighting Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. It's kind of just there as a low energy cost revenge attacker to take a KO and let you set up something else. And then Roaring Resolve, where you can put 2 damage counters on it and search your deck for a basic fighting energy and attach it to the Lucario. And then Aura Sphere Volley does 10 plus 60 for each fighting energy you discard from the Lucario. So that can go infinite and lets you stack up pretty quickly in OHKO whatever you need to. And it pairs rather well with the Proud Fangs Hisuian Arcanine, which does 120 damage for free if your bench Pokemon have any damage counters on them. So you just use Roaring Resolve to start setting up another attacker, and then for no energy, you can do 120 damage. And then I mentioned the Colossal earlier. This other Hisuian Arcanine with the Scorching Horn does 160 damage for 2 fighting and a colorless, but only if it has any fire energy attached to it. So you can just use the Colossal to accelerate the fighting and the fire, manually attach another fighting, and you're doing 160. This is probably, in my opinion, one of the coolest combos in the Gym Leader Challenge format. The Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and Hitmontop combo. The Hitmonchan has Hit and Run, which for 1 fighting, it does 30 damage, and you may switch it with one of your bench Pokemon. Then you use Hitmonlee's special combo, which for 1 fighting, you can only use it if one of your Hitmonlee used Hit and Run, then you do 90 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. And then after that, you come up with the Hitmontop with the finishing combo, which you can only use if one of your Hitmonlee use special combo, and it just does 60 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. So you can like destroy your opponent's entire board state. You go Hitmonchan, put some damage on something. Hitmonlee, take out one of their support Pokemon or one of their attackers on the bench. And then Hitmontop, take a couple KOs. And then after the Hitmontop, you can either do the combo again, or you can go in with Tinglu and Ground Crasher, or a Palossand Sandpot Trap and clean up just the rest of their board. This Donphan with Earthquake. Earthquake is a very common attack in the fighting type. It's typically low energy, pretty high damage, and then it does damage to your benched Pokemon. Donphan specifically is a 1 energy 120 damage Earthquake, and it does 20 damage to each of your Pokemon. So there are attackers that want to have damage, like the Hisuian Arcanine on your bench, and you can kind of sit there, put some damage on the bench, and swing for pretty aggressive numbers for just one energy. Ancient has four cards that are fighting types, so you can feasibly play Sadas, which is just crazy draw and crazy energy acceleration, and it gives fighting a bit more consistency. This Koraidon with the Unrelenting Onslaught, where if one of your other ancient Pokemon used an attack during your last turn, it does 150 more damage for 180 damage total for just 2 colorless energy. And then the Slitherwing does 140, and then it does 90 to itself and burns your opponent's active. So again, you have Professor Sada's Vitality to charge up both of these and kind of aggressively go off with basic Pokemon. This Steelix pairs well with Earthquake, and it actually has Earthquake. You won't typically be using the Steelix's Earthquake. You'll typically be using the powerful Rage attack, which does 20 damage for each damage counter on the Steelix. So you kind of just let it sit on the bench and take damage from the Earthquakes, and then it can come up and delete whatever's in your opponent's active. And then this Annihilate is a pretty good late game attacker. Single energy, 70 damage times the amount of prize cards your opponent has taken. So late game, you can swing for 350 damage, just blow up your opponent's active. And then Dynamite Punch for 2 fighting, 170, and does 50 to itself. You won't typically be using that, but 170 for 2 is not bad at all. In terms of fighting specific trainers, it's not too bad with the diversity. You've got Team Magma's Great Ball, and you won't consistently be using it to get the basic Team Magma Pokemon. You'll be using it to get the basic fighting energy and put it into your hand, because you can grab the Team Magma's Great Ball off of Ball Guy, and it just lets fighting have a card that lets you get a bit more setup and get an energy card if you need to. And then Gutsy Pickaxe, you reveal the top card of your deck, and if that card is a fighting energy card, you attach it to one of your bench Pokemon, and if it's not, you put it into your hand. So it's a bit of draw, especially on an item, which is what fighting likes to see. Fighting has a couple stadiums. Scorched Earth, you may discard a fire or a fighting energy and draw 2 cards. This pairs nicely with the Colossal, which wants energy in the discard anyway. Martial Arts Dojo, the attacks of non-Ultra Beast Pokemon that have any basic fighting energy attached do 10 more damage, and then if the attacking player has more prize cards than their opponent, the attacks do 40 more instead. So if you're losing, this can let your fighting Pokemon with energy attached do more damage by a considerable amount. And then Brooklet Hill, a bit of consistency. Search your deck for a basic water or a basic fighting Pokemon and put it on your bench. Fighting does have some pretty good supporters. Karina lets you search your deck for a fighting Pokemon and an item. So this lets you get Battle VIP Pass, Buddy Buddy Poffin, any of the ball search cards that fighting likes to use, and put them both into your hand. It's like Irida, but this came out way before Irida ever existed. Grant lets your fighting Pokemon do 30 more damage, and then if Grant is in your discard pile, you can discard 2 other cards, except any Grant, and put Grant back into your hand from the discard pile. So if it's in the discard pile, you can always get it back, and this could thin out your hand for something like Bicycle, which lets you draw until you have 4 cards in your hand. Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick, really cool card. You can only use it if it's the last card in your hand, but you put a fighting Pokemon from your discard pile onto your bench and draw 5 cards. So it's a bit of draw, and it lets you get, for example, one of the fossil Pokemon straight from your discard pile onto your bench. So you can kind of immediately get the Amistar and start item locking your opponent, and you get to draw a bunch of cards too. In terms of tools, fighting's got Karate Belt, where if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, the attacks of the Pokemon Karate Belt is attached to cost 1 fighting less. So that can make it so your Okidogi only needs 1 energy to attack, and other stuff like that. Focus Sash, if the fighting Pokemon this card is attached to has full HP and would be knocked out, its remaining HP becomes 10, and you discard the Focus Sash. So this can make it so that you're guaranteed to get at least 2 attacks off with a given attacker, unless they like field blower it away or something. But it will force them to have to find that field blower to do so. Hitmon combo, you use the Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and Hitmontop. You kind of cycle through, destroy your opponent's board state slowly, and use the backup attackers Okidogi, Tinglu, Lucario, and Palossand to just clean up the game after you go through the Hitmon combo once or maybe even twice. The Lily's Pokédoll is a really cool card in here because the Hitmonchan's hit and run, you can go into the Lily's Pokédoll, and if they knock the Lily's Pokédoll out, they don't get a prize for KOing it. The Hitmonchan's damage with the hit and run can actually get pretty crazy with the likes of Strong Energy, which makes your fighting Pokemon do 20 more damage as long as it's attached to the fighting Pokemon. Muscle Band, again, 20 more damage. And then Martial Arts Dojo is 10 more damage. So with all three of those in play, assuming you're just starting the game out, you're doing 30 plus 20 plus 20 plus 10. That's 80 damage for 1 energy. And you move. So even if you don't KO or your opponent's active, you're still preserving the Hitmonchan to maybe go back in again. Fossil Lock, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be using the Maxis to try to get just the Maxis in hand and abuse the Archeops and the Kabutops to kind of lock your opponent out of the game. It uses a more hit and run style with the Hitmonchan boosting its damage with the Fighting Fury Machamp, which makes your fighting Pokemon do 20 more damage. And again, other effects like Strong Energy and Muscle Band. So you can do some pretty heavy damage with the Hitmonchan and then go back into the Kabutops so they can't play any supporters. And if you get the Archeops established early enough, they won't be able to play any evolution Pokemon to evolve their basics, and the Hitmonchan could just start taking KOs on those basics. Earthquake fighting, low to the ground, kind of just start spamming Earthquake and use your other attackers like the Arcanine once you have damage on the bench, the Lucario to take return KOs, and the Martial Arts Dojo, Strong Energy, Muscle Band, boost your damage a bit more, hit those numbers that might be just out of range. Ancient Fighting uses the Colossal because it's just a really good energy acceleration, and even if you're just using it to accelerate the one fighting, that's still just one less energy you need in play to, power up an attacker. The Koraidon, the Unrelenting Onslaught, if the Koraidon gets KO'd and you bring it back with the likes of Night Stretcher, you put it back into your hand, and when you bench it, you actually can use Unrelenting Onslaught for 180 because the game recognizes the Koraidon as a new Pokemon, and because one of your ancient Pokemon that used an attack during the last turn, it can do the 180 damage again. So as long as the Koraidon gets KO'd, leaves the active or bench position and goes to the discard pile, you can kind of just bring it back and do the 180 again. And that makes it a lot easier to do with the Tar Generator. Just put the Koraidon down, Tar Generator, Fighting Fire to it, and it does 180 damage. So thanks for watching. I'll leave all the deck lists shown in the description. I'll leave the official Gym Leader Challenge website and the ban list, and then the Cardboard Warriors website, which is great to go and check out other deck lists and even make your own. Thanks for watching. Support me by liking and subscribing the video, and I should have another one coming out next week.